Recently, we've had some very welcoming news out of the House of Representatives on the Toxic Substances Control Act. The House passed that in the last several days, 403 to 12. A wonderful, large, bipartisan majority. And I'm glad we're going to proceed to TSCA sometime soon here on the Senate floor and deal with the legislation here. So, Mr. President, you know, most Americans believe that if they buy a product at a grocery store or a hardware store, the government has tested it and determined that it's safe. Until now, that has not been true. We're exposed to hundreds of chemicals in our daily lives in countless ways. We can breathe and eat and drink chemicals. They can be absorbed through our skin, even from common household items. Some are toxic, but almost none are regulated. And let me give you now a couple of examples. There are flame retardants in your sofas and other furniture that get up into the air when the pressure's put on the furniture. Formaldehyde in pressed wood floors and in carpets, glues and adhesives, and even in non-iron shirts. The PFOA compounds from nonstick coating on your frying pans and bakeware. Most water bottles are BPA-free now, but you still find BPA in your credit card receipts. And some laser printers give off ultrafine particles like volatile organic compounds that can cause serious health problems. And I could go on and on and on with the list of chemicals that are out there in our society that citizens are exposed to every day. As a result of that exposure, we carry these chemicals around in our bodies even before we are born. But we don't know the full impact they are having on our health, because in the last 40 years, only a handful have ever been reviewed for safety. The EPA lacks the ability to evaluate and the authority to regulate, even though some have linked many of these chemicals to various kinds of diseases like cancer, infertility, Parkinson's disease, diabetes, hyperthyroidism, and other diseases that are out there. Infants, pregnant women, the elderly, and workers exposed to chemicals on the job are particularly at risk for chemical exposure. For example, we've seen an increase in cancer rates among firefighters who get exposed to chemicals from smoldering furniture in house fires. Mr. President, that's why we must pass the Frank R. Lautenberg Chemical Safety for the 21st Century Act. It will be a working chemical safety law for the whole country, for our families, for our children. We will, for the first time, really have a cop on the beat when it comes to safety. Protecting our children and our communities from dangerous chemicals. For the first time in 40 years, we're going to have that cop out there working hard to make sure our families are safe. Getting here has taken years of negotiations and collaboration, working with stakeholders across the country. But now Congress can send the President a strong, bipartisan environmental reform bill, and he will sign it into law. There's no doubt about that from the statement put out by the administration on this bill. In fact, I think they called it landmark reform by the Congress. The EPA has commented that this bill, and I want to quote here, is a clear improvement over current law and is largely consistent with the administration's principles for TSCA reform. Critically, the bill would address the fundamental flaws that have hindered EPA's ability to protect human health and the environment from chemical risks. And I end the quote there, the EPA quote. The administration has also put out a statement of policy saying that it strongly supports this legislation. Mr. President, Americans have been calling out for this reform for decades. They understand that we need a national solution to our broken chemical safety law because they have seen the impacts firsthand. Like Dominic Browning, who works with Moms Clean Air Force. She survived kidney cancer and now wants a safer place for her kids. When she asked her doctor what caused her illness, he said, "It's one of those environmental ones. Who knows? We're full of chemicals." And Lisa Huguenin. Lisa is a PhD scientist who has done work on chemical exposure at Princeton and Rutgers and at the state and federal level. But it isn't what she saw at work that really motivated her to work for reform. It was what she saw at home. Lisa's 13-year-old son, Harrison, was born with autism and other autoimmune deficiencies. 5 years ago, Lisa testified before Senator Lautenberg's subcommittee on the need for reform. Since then, her husband, Mark, has undergone tests for a rare and newly discovered disease that wasn't even known to exist when she testified. So she's eager to see TSCA reform be signed into law. Lisa recently wrote to me, and she said, and I quote here, "The concerns I expressed 5 years ago remain today. I have no way of knowing if the household products that I use or the toys my son plays with are really safe because the chemicals that make them up are not rigorously tested. And there is little or no information regarding them. And if I, a person well educated in the field of human exposures to chemicals, cannot be confident that I'm keeping my family safe, then neither can the average person." End quote. My office has appreciated Lisa's emails and photographs of Harrison dressed as a broccoli for Halloween and of Mark playing his favorite guitar. They have inspired us to keep going, to recognize that this legislation has a tremendous impact on real people. Thanks to Lisa and Dominic and the many others who care about a safe environment, healthy kids, the safety of the clothes we wear, the pots and pans we cook with, and the substances we breathe. We finally have an opportunity to pass a law that will keep our kids safe from dangerous chemicals. Mr. President, TSCA was enacted in 1976. It was one of the major laws of the 1960s and 70s. That was when Rachel Carson and environmental leaders who worked with her opened our eyes. They showed us how air pollution, water pollution, and chemicals in our environment were affecting our health and changing ecosystems right in our backyards. TSCA was supposed to protect American families, but it didn't. Since 1976, thousands of chemicals a year have been manufactured and released onto the market without a safety evaluation, without meaningful regulation. Over 4 decades, the EPA has been able to restrict just 5 chemicals and has prevented only 4 chemicals from going to market out of tens of thousands. It took 40 years to fix this broken system. Now we have historic reform. Decades in the making and decades overdue. Mr. President, here are some of the ways we're reforming this broken law and replacing it with a working safety program. Under the old TSCA, reviewing chemicals was discretionary. This new law requires that EPA methodically review existing chemicals for safety, starting with the worst offenders. The old TSCA required that EPA consider the costs and benefits of regulation when studying the safety of chemicals. This new law requires that EPA consider only the health and environmental impacts of a chemical. And if they demonstrate a risk, the EPA must regulate. And this new law states that when it considers the safety of a chemical, the EPA must evaluate how it would impact the most vulnerable: pregnant women, infants, the elderly, and chemical workers. The old TSCA put burdensome requirements on the EPA. To test a chemical, the EPA had to show it posed a potential risk, and then it had to go through a long rulemaking process. Our new law gives the EPA new authority to order testing without those hurdles. The old TSCA allowed new chemicals to go to market without any real review, an average of about 750 a year. New chemicals flowed onto the market. This new law would require the EPA to determine that all chemicals are safe before they go onto the market. The old TSCA allowed companies to hide information about their product, claiming it is confidential business information, even in an emergency. This new law will ensure that companies can no longer hide. States, medical professionals, and the public will have access to this information. And it ensures that businesses will justify when they keep information confidential, and that right will expire after 10 years. The old TSCA underfunded the EPA, so it never had the resources to do the job. This new law creates a new, dedicated funding stream. It requires industry to pay its share, $25 million a year. In addition, this new law ensures victims access to the court if they are hurt, minimizes unnecessary testing on animals, and ensures states can continue to take strong action on dangerous chemicals. We have spent a great deal of time on the right of states to act. My colleague, Senator Boxer, has said this is one of the hardest pieces of legislation she has ever worked on. I agree with her. Finding the right balance between state and federal was not easy. There's no doubt about it. But we stayed at the table, we worked hard, and I believe we have a true compromise. It's a compromise that creates strong federal tools to test, review, and regulate chemicals, that ensures states can act when the EPA is not acting, that protects the work that states have already done, and that allows states to get a waiver when there is overlap with the EPA. Mr. President, some of our colleagues have said that while they will support this bill, it isn't a bill they would have written. I agree. If it were up to me, I would have written a different bill. But if it were up to me, it wouldn't have taken 40 years for us to get reform. And it isn't up to me. It isn't up to any one of us. Legislating, especially on complex and difficult issues that affect all aspects of health, environment, and commerce, that takes work, it takes patience, and it takes compromise. This bill took all the hard work, patience, and cooperation we had, and the end result is a stronger regulatory program to test and assess chemicals, a stronger program to ensure that our most vulnerable children and loved ones are protected, and a stronger program that ensures the public has access to important health and safety information on chemicals. Our colleagues in the House supported this bill, as I said earlier, 403 to 12. That's 2 more votes than the Clean Air Act amendments got in 1991, so it shows the strong bipartisan support. This is the largest margin for a major environmental bill in decades, and I believe the Senate very soon will follow suit. I have a long list, and this probably isn't the place to do it, of people I would like to thank in terms of the staff effort. One of the things that's absolutely clear is our staff, all of the staff that were involved in this worked very hard and helped us reach that perfect spot where we had a good compromise. And so I'll do some of those thank yous at a later point. But I also want to say, and it's very important here, that we realize why we named this law after Frank Lautenberg. You know, he started us on this path. It was Frank Lautenberg. I have a picture of him here with his grandchildren. The picture was taken by his wife, Bonnie Lautenberg, who's a wonderful photographer. And Frank was always motivated. He was always motivated by his children and grandchildren. He used to sit in committee, I'll never forget him, asking questions very specifically. You know, how does this impact future generations, children, grandchildren? What impact is this going to have? And so he became very frustrated with the gridlock, with the problems that we were having in terms of the Environment and Public Works Committee. And so he teamed up with Senator Vitter, and almost immediately, 12 Democrats and 12 Republicans joined in on that bill. I was one of the 12 Democrats, but shortly thereafter, we lost Frank. And so I decided, you know, this is something that should be picked up and continued. Frank had set such a great example. We had some good bipartisan momentum. And so Senator Vitter and I had dinner, and we decided, we're going to see this through. And one of our greatest partners, and really our inspiration in helping us see this through, was Bonnie Lautenberg. She took her pain and agony and wanted to get something done. She plowed it into something positive. And she's been absolutely terrific in terms of working with all of us in the House and in the Senate. I know Representative Shimkus in the House said some very flattering things about her, all of which are true. And one of the things she did is she helped hold together Frank Lautenberg's staff, who had worked on the legislation for close to 15 years. They had various drafts over the years of chemical legislation. They knew the facts. They knew the evidence. They knew what was out there and the dangers to the children and the grandchildren. And so she worked with them. She helped keep us on track. It's wonderful to have her today in Washington with us, being able to hopefully see this happen today, maybe a little bit later in the day. But I want to thank her so much and have her know that she really inspired us and kept us focused and kept us on track. So I'm hopeful that we are going to act very soon. I would urge all of my colleagues to support this legislation, and I would urge the President to sign it. And if we do that, we're going to be in a much better place as a country and as a society. So with that, I see my good friend Senator Inhofe is here, the chairman of the committee. They always say around here, and I know my good friend Patty Murray told me this, you don't get a bill through this Congress without having a strong chairman, and there couldn't have been a stronger chairman than Chairman Inhofe in terms of
yield.
And I
Before
certainly
you yield the floor, I just wanted to get in on this because you've said a lot of really great things, and I don't recall any time someone from the private sector like the Lautenbergs and coming in and participating the way that she has, and I really do appreciate it. And I know she's around here somewhere. And but let me say this: you commented about when we lost Frank and where we all were at that time. I have to say this publicly: you're the guy that jumped in there and took up that vacuum that was created by his loss, and we could not have done it. There are a lot of people. When I stop and I think about all the people who are enthusiastically supporting this, in the years I've been here, and I'm talking about 22 years here in the Senate, I've never seen this happen before, where you have so much unanimity, not even on the highway bills or on the other things that we have done together. But I want to make sure that everyone knows that you are very much the reason that we're where we are today. And I hope we can finish this up today, make everyone happy. And then also, one thing I was talking to a group yesterday, and if you yield further, in talking to this, we haven't really used the issue of jobs as we should have in this. And they're talking about how many, and I won't mention the names of the companies, that they are right now employing in places like China and India and other places because of the uncertainty of the definitions that we have in this country. This completely solves that. And I don't think anyone has ever put the pencil to how many jobs can be immediately recreated in this country along with other things that will be coming in the future. This could end up being the greatest jobs bill, not of the year, but of the decade. Does the Senator agree with that?
I do. I very much agree with that. I think when it comes to innovation, when it comes to moving in the direction of creating products that are going to be sustainable over time, I don't have any doubt that this bill is going to have a huge impact. And I think that the thing that you helped us do as chairman, we always kept at the table everybody. Industry was at the table, environmental groups, public health groups. The EPA was giving us technical advice, and we had the states and others, and we stayed at the table and worked through the problems and created a piece of legislation that I think when it becomes law will end up helping create jobs, make a safer environment, protect our families and our children. And I'll never forget when Senator Vitter and I came to you when you became the chairman. It was at the beginning of this Congress. We told you the bipartisan support we had, and you said right then, you said, we're going to get on this. We're going to do this. And you've been true to your word. You've worked very hard on this, and it's been an inspiration for me to work in a bipartisan way and have a strong chairman that we ran into bumpy times with the House for a while, but having a strong chairman really made a difference on this. And so I thank you so much.
Also, the personalities. I mean, we have the far left and the far right. Everybody realized this is something that we all can agree on. Do I understand the senator that Bonnie Lautenberg is here today?
Yes, Bonnie Lautenberg is here in Congress. We don't want to violate any of the rules. I think she's in the room with us here today. But yeah, she came down. As you know, Senator Inhofe, we have a First Ladies luncheon, and all the spouses attend that luncheon, and then in the night, all the senators get together for that annual dinner.
Sure.
And Bonnie Lautenberg's been here ever since then. She's been down here numerous times, as you know. This photograph, I don't know if you were here earlier, I was always remarking on what a great photograph this was of Frank Lautenberg. And you look at the grandchildren, they all have these wonderful smiles. And as you know, he always talked in the committee about his grandchildren. She took that photograph. She's a pretty incredible photographer. And she took it and... Well,
I have to say this, too. Frank and I used to talk about that. You know, I've got 20 kids and grandkids, and we used to compete with each other about and exchange pictures, and that was one of the many things that we had in common. Well, I'll look forward to visiting with Monty today. I look forward to making this major accomplishment, and it's so important to do it today because we have a recess coming up. The House has a recess coming up, and there are a lot of people, a lot of companies out there who are making decisions now as to what they're going to do, all predicated on their certainty that this bill is going to pass.
Yeah.
So we'll join together and just do the best we can to make that happen for the sake of a lot of jobs around the country.
We sure will. Thank you, Chairman Inhofe. I would yield my time.